Welcome to Tina Talks, where time is not a healer, but we believe that we all have the power to heal ourselves and take our mental well being into our own hands. This podcast is a byproduct of Tina, the mental well-being marketplace, and a community platform at timeisnotahealer.com, providing you with the best products for your self-healing journey. Hit subscribe and follow us on socials if you want support on your mental well-being journey. We're your hosts. This is Sophie, I'm Kelsey, and this episode is all about handling life transitions and the different seasons of life that we experience.
And there are so many seasons that we go through in our lives because we go through so much change. Just like the seasons in a year, we obviously have seasons in life. And often, many of us struggle to transition between those seasons because ultimately, as human beings, we don't really like change. So we get stuck in our little comfort bubbles and comfort zones. And then when it comes to like a big thing changing in our lives, sometimes we really struggle with that shift. And we also want to kind of talk about what happens when you're in between those seasons as well, because that also has a next level discomfort that I would love to go into. And I think I really want to talk about this subject because I feel like I'm in that kind of in between seasons. I've gone through so many different seasons of life, particularly in the way that I live my life with traveling so much and living on as a nomad, but right now I'm in this weird transition phase and it is very uncomfortable. But I don't know, let's dig into it. I don't know, but maybe a good place to start is to ask you, like, what season of your life do you feel like you're in right now?
Oh God. I feel like I'm in the overwhelm season. If I'm being honest. No, it's been a really wild year. Really big. It's been some big life transitions. And I know some people have listened to these episodes, some people haven't. But in the last year, I went from living the lifestyle that Sophie is living. Well, granted, you travel a little more frequently. Like you move more frequently than I ever have. I've always been someone where I go to another country and I post up for 6 months to 2 years. Like that's I'm a slow traveler. And so I've been living out of the country for the last 6 years. And then last summer, I moved back to the US. And so I moved to Chicago, which I'm originally from outside the city and I'm like familiar with Chicago, but living in the city is a new experience and I'm all for it. But it was a big seasonal transition of like going from this identity of being this long-term slow traveler to now I'm back in the US and I'm like getting situated here and stabilized here. I also had the transition of my mom passing, so like that was a whole different kind of transition of life. Both of my parents are officially gone um and then I know that came out really weird. And and outside of that, I mean, so I came in June and then it was winter and I was kind of depressed. And so there was like the depression, the winter blues with the actual seasons themselves. And then now we're into like full on summer, which I think summer in and of itself is a lot of like beautiful weather, you got to get out, you got to do everything, you got to socialize, and then you're go go go. At least we've been go 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 with work, with Tina, with our own businesses. So I don't know, it's just been a lot of. I feel like the seasons have been a lot. It's been quick transitions. I don't know if it feels like that for you ever. I don't know, how does it feel for you when you're kind of going through it?
Yeah, I definitely think, like, obviously I've been traveling and nomading now for 2 3 years, so I
Mhm.
feel like when you are living in this lifestyle in this way, you go through even more transitions than you would if you were stable in like one place. Um, so it's quite interesting hearing it from your perspective. Obviously, there's been a lot going on in your life in the past year, but you've been in one location, but yet you've still been transitioning through those seasons and like all of the different challenges that come with those as well. I definitely feel like I have lived about 1,000 lifetimes in the past like 3 years, to be honest. There has been so many things happen. I think that a lot of that has come down to the fact that my business has been in like different stages in the past couple of years. I'm trying to launch this new business, which the whole reason we're on the podcast is because this new business is being launched. I've at one point last year, I hadn't lived anywhere more than 3 weeks at a time. So I was constantly changing environments, and to be honest, that was way too much. And then at the same time, I've been doing this whole deep excavation on myself of like trying to improve my mental and my physical well-being. And I go through these phases of, I'm 1 minute I'm working on my physical health, and the next minute I'm working on my mental health, and then vice versa. I'm trying to do all of the different things. So there's a lot been happening, a lot been going on in between. At the same time, this year, for example, I've been selling my property, which was my only real stability back in the UK. So there's been a lot happening. Also different relationships. You're in a committed relationship, I am not, and I've been dating and like going through different relationships and breakups and all of these different things. So there's been a lot of happening, and it feels like finally now I'm in this season, and I would say I've been in this season for like 6 months now, and I feel like I'm transitioning slowly out of it, which thank God, because the past 6 months have been pretty intense. And that season was very much like I'm in this weird phase where I'm no longer in my true nomad phase of like life, where I want to be moving around all the time and like working on all these different things and dating all these different people. And now I'm transitioning into this new phase, which I don't know what that quite looks like yet, but I know it's obviously is still travel in some way. It's obviously still related to business, but my business is changing in itself as well, and like the things that I'm prioritizing my business is changing. So it's been this really uncomfortable 6 months of not really knowing where I am, what I'm going, because the old part of my life has kind of has ended, I would say now, but it's not yet started into this new phase. So I'm in this weird like middle ground transition, which when you haven't navigated something like that before, you don't really know how to navigate it. So it's interesting. It's been an interesting period.
I would ask you, because this is kind of how it feels for me. Doesn't it feel a little bit like you're dying? Like, I know that sounds really intense, but like, I know it sounds okay. I'm not really dying, guys, but
No,
like,
I get it.
when a period of your life, like something that you have developed your identity around, or it's just been such a significant part of your life for, even if it's only 6 months, like, right? I think because you said you've been traveling, what you said, like 3 years.
Full
Yeah,
time, yeah.
full time. And so for me, it was 6 years, almost 7 years. And like, we did it very differently. You were a little bit more fast paced and I was slow, but like the end of that, no matter what that pattern was for you, the end of it, to me, I okay, I still refuse. I'm fully not have not given up that identity. I still refuse to get a US based number. I have my old US number ported to Google, and I I use an eSIM, and I just use WhatsApp and Instagram and Facebook. I don't have an actual number that I can call people locally from. I don't have a local number. And whenever I need to like make a call like that, I'll use Skype. 1-800 on Skype, guys. It's free. And or I'll have to pay 10 cents or whatever a minute to like call, if I have to call a family member that doesn't have that. But I like have been so unwilling to like let go of that last piece of my identity. And that's like the one thing I'm holding on to, because it just feels it's transitioning between seasons can feel like death. It can feel like a huge loss. And I don't know if it feels that way for you.
I'm gonna counteract what you're saying, because I'm gonna say it feels like a rebirth rather than a death. It
Okay.
feels like it feels like yes, I get what you mean, because you do grieve the parts of the things that you loved and once experienced, and you look back at those and think, oh, but do I still want that? And like still quite fondly of like some of the experiences, I'm sure. And then equally, you know that they're not right for you as you are right now, because you've probably outgrown them in some way, shape, or form. So I feel like I have literally, I get it. I don't feel like I've died, but I do feel like I've been reborn into this new version, where you just look back at things and you see things a bit more clearly, and you're like, oh, I can see why these things happened in the way that they did, or whatever. And then you're like trying to move into the new phase. But I do understand what you mean, because ultimately we've done an episode on grief before, and every season of your life that you once felt was going to last forever. Obviously there's a period of grieving that comes with that, and ultimately every time something changes, you're losing something. Even if it's for the better, there's still something being lost, so you're still going through that period of grief, in which case, yeah, it's associated with death, right?
I think that's a really solid point, is that even if it's for the better, right? Like my transition to my life now is definitely like I made choices because I have a partner here that I really love, and he's my person and I want to be with, and home base is here. We're still traveling, we're just doing it differently. But I think that's a really solid point, is that even if it's like, the whole point is that we grow and we change, and so we need to like level up into a new season, to step into that different season that all of these experiences have now built us up to. And the point that even if it's good, we still grieve. It's still a loss to some degree. And I think that's like conflicting. Like a lot of people will say, yeah, I did this, or like it felt okay, but there's a lot of buts in psychology and certain like therapeutic practices, learning how to say, yeah, I feel happy and anxious. Not like I'm
Yeah,
happy, but I'm anxious, because you can feel those two things simultaneously. And I think it doesn't make sense, because like we let the kind of more negative emotion diminish the positive experience. And yeah, and so I don't know, I just wanted to emphasize what you said, that I think that's a really solid point, that it's okay to have a really good experience happening at the same time of experiencing like sad grief, like negative emotions, if you want to put it that way, with these different transitions. um yeah, I just wanted to
yeah.
add on to that.
No, I agree. I think, and it's hard sometimes to get your head around that, because we're not taught about emotions, right? We don't really understand how the hell we process them. Two, let alone processing two different contrasting emotions at one time. So it's completely understandable that people don't like change and don't like transitions, because it is highly uncomfortable,
Oh yeah.
if you especially if you really did love the season that you're just come out of, and you're going into this new one, and you're like, but it needs to be as good as the last one, or like, I need to learn as much as I learned in this one. And I will say that, like, the past 3 years of my life have been by far the best years of my life. Like, I've had the most amazing experiences, the most amazing time. I've learned so much about myself. But then this past 6 months has tested me in so many different ways that I was like, is this, can I say this is the worst period of my life? And I would like say, actually, no, I don't think it is. But in some moments it's felt that way, because it's just been so intense and it's been so many different things. And I would say, like when you go through those phases sometimes where like everything gets upheavaled, and then you're like, oh, chill out life, like chill out universe, like, can you just give me one thing, one stability, one piece of stability, and then I can handle the rest of it. But it felt like in the past 6 months everything just kind of got thrown up in the air and was like, boom 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 boom, let's just chuck all the shit at you, and not give you too many amazing things to balance it out, which, like I said, I feel like I'm coming out at the end of that now. But I've thought that a few times. So sometimes you can also feel like you're coming out of the transition and going into the next one. It's a full start. It's like at the Olympics. Like sometimes they'll shoot that gun and it won't be. They're just joking, kind of thing. Sometimes the universe tricks you in those ways as well. But it just feels highly uncomfortable, and I can totally understand why people struggle when they're going through difficult periods, which is why it's been so important, particularly for me in the past 6 months, to have a toolkit of things that I try and fall back to. And even though I would say sometimes it doesn't always work, in all honesty, like, because you're so far in it that it's really hard to drag yourself out. But it has maintained me at a level where it is copable, kind of thing, to get through the transition. I don't know how you felt about that, obviously, in the past year where there's been so many things going on. Like, have you felt like you've had things that you've like fallen back on to try and like keep you going throughout that period?
Wait, can you say that question one more time?
Like, where you obviously you've had quite a lot of things going on in the past year, do you feel like you've had like a toolkit of things, like your breathwork, your yoga, whatever it is, that's
Oh
keeping you
yeah.
going and sustaining you throughout that period? Which, if you didn't have that toolkit,
Yeah.
you would have been 10 times worse off mentally, for example, when you're struggling.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think to before I answer your question, and I do this all the time, I know I do this, to piggy like to go back to what you were saying, I think, right? If you want to call it life, universe, God, whatever it is to you, for me, I'd say the universe. The universe will continue to throw things at us, like lessons that we need to learn until we've like actually fully learned it and integrated it into our lives. And so I think that's why like sometimes seasons are repeating, like or like that get stuck in one season until you actually like learn and apply it. Um, and I do think that when you have a toolkit of how to take care of yourself through those different seasons, and I think there's a tool, it's different for each season. Ooh, that'd be a great idea. We should come up with some toolkits that are season based, right? And we'll talk about like the different seasons and symbolism in a minute, but yeah, when I've been in a rough transition where, right, I'm closing one chapter and starting another, and like you said, when it rains it freaking pours. Like I was closing this 6-year chapter of my life. I was moving in with a partner for the very first time, which is like, I some people it's not a big deal for that. For me, it was a huge deal to be doing that, and I was coming back to the US, which I wasn't really interested in doing it in the first place. Because you know I've been enjoying my 6 years out of the country, and then my mom got sick and passed. This all happened literally at the same time. Like came back in June, moved in June. My mom passed in June, all at the same time. Like it when it rains, it pours, and the toolkit that I mean, I'll say this, when you're in it, it's harder to start new things to take care of yourself, right? Like it'd be like, oh yeah, doing breath work would be really helpful. But if you're already in like a not so great place, it can be really hard to start those kind of habits. I've done a lot of work on my personal habits and routines over the last 6 years. So like even when I fall out of it, I know that I will easily return to it. And I know when I'm in a bad place, it's not hard for me to restart it because it's already something that's ingrained in me. Um, but sleeping is huge, being in nature is huge, breath work is huge, yoga and moving my body. And when at like things are really hard, doesn't matter what that body movement is. If it's like I can't do the normal yoga that I want to do, like I'm feeling too slow or stuck, it's like just go for a walk. Go for a walk outside. As long as I'm moving my body a little bit each day, it makes a huge difference. Or right, like high intensity interval training is not necessarily great for women and their hormones. I fucking love it. I it's an exercise that I love, and it's something I can easily get into, and then it immediately takes my brain off of things, and I'm just, like, focused on my body, and that's really helpful. So if that's what I gotta do, I'll do a little bit of high intensity interval. I'll do what I can to just feel a little bit better in my body and grounded in the moment. Um, and then, of course, like, you need to process the things that are happening, and if it's, like, a little bit past being in the actual shit, that's the time to process it. And so leaning into journaling, even like guided meditations to like walk through your feelings have been really helpful. I would say that's my main toolkit of stuff that I use quite consistently. What about you? Oh, you're muted.
Mine's quite similar. And I would say definitely any form of meditation in the morning. Like as long as I have that morning routine, like meditation and movement piece, I should be better set up for the day ahead. And getting outside and walking, like I've been doing so much walking the past like 3 months. I would say I've averaged on like 10, 12,000 steps a day, more or less. Um, and then sometimes I'll come, like right now I'm in at my parents' house, there's not really anywhere for me to walk to. So that then naturally declines. But I know that it's good for me. So I'm like, right, force yourself to go out for a walk um and do something. But where I've been living in Costa Rica or Barcelona, for example, thousands of steps a day because there's just so much. Like I go and walk miles down the beach, walk around the city, like there's just loads of things. So like getting myself outside and like say movement is a big one for me. Like I particularly when I'm stressed hold a lot of extra energy that I have to release in some way. And I feel like for me doing activity in movement, Pilates, boxing, yoga, whatever is the best way for me to release that. And then also, like, I do a lot of law of attraction, like manifestation workshops and meditations, reflection, that kind of thing, because I really do believe that the energy that you put out is the energy you get back. So if I'm sitting there like miserable, the only things that I'm going to get is just miserable things that coming at me. And when you're in it, that's so hard to shift your mindset from like misery to positivity. But it is something that I actively try to do, even if I don't always succeed in that. If I'm in my shit for a bit, I will be working on that to try and get myself out of it, because I know firsthand from previous experiences, when I'm in a really good place, all of these amazing things just flow naturally and come to me. Whereas when I'm in like a really negative mindset, more and more crap just tends to build up. So there would be some of the things that I would do, but it also just depends, like we said, on the season as well, because there's different seasons to symbolize different things. So if we think about the seasons of the year, you've got what, spring, summer, autumn, and winter in most places in the world. Some places only have wet and dry, some places only have hot and cold. So it really does depend on where you are in the world, but in general most places have the 4 seasons. And each season has like a different symbolism, right? And we can kind of compare that to different places that we're in our lives as well. So if we're going into spring, which is the first season of the year, it's all about like that kind of like renewal, growth, new opportunities, like starting a fresh energy. So usually like we'd associate those kind of transitions, big periods such as like starting a new job, moving to a new home, beginning a new relationship, in that spring period. If you think about like flowers blossoming in the field, that is you at that moment in time in your life. Like when you are experiencing that new job that you're going into, you're about to blossom into your new career, or you're starting a new relationship, there's something blooming, right? So spring kind of symbolizes that renewal, growth period in life. When you are in like your summer energy, you're all about kind of like really high energy. There's a lot of things going on. You're living life at 100 miles an hour. You're attracting lots of things, opportunities, things coming into your life. Because it's a very high intensity. Let's compare it to HIIT workouts. It's like that moment where everything is happening and you're a bit frantic, you're a bit all over the place, but in a good way, not in that bad way. Autumn is often where we retreat a little bit and we're looking back and reflecting on the things that are happening. Maybe there's also another period of change happening at that time of the year, because obviously you have that time at the beginning of the year with spring, lots of changes happen, then you have a bit more of a integration period through summer, and then in autumn potentially more changes come. If we think about in the Western world, most school years start in autumn. So when you go back to school, most places will go back to school in like September, October time, and then obviously your school year begins. I know that's different in Latin America, for example. Some places there they start in like February, which when I went there I was mind blown, because that does not associate with me.
No, I actually just, I mean, I remember as a kid us starting at like the beginning of September. I guess school starts in August. Like I've never heard of February for school start.
No, in Latin America it was February, and I was mind blown by it. I was like, that doesn't make sense to me.
Oh, that's different. That's way different than the US for
Yeah.
sure. The US is August, like
Yeah.
August, September.
Yeah, in the UK it's September, October. So yeah, that's the reflection of like kind of new beginnings again midway through the year. And like changes probably in your routines as well, because as we go into like in the Western world colder months, or naturally like a different season, like we're changing from that like lightweight, we're kind of putting on a bit more baggage as we go into the autumn. And then if we look at winter, it normally reflects of stillness, reflection, and potentially a bit of isolation, a little bit lower energy, because naturally winter is a bit more of a dark and dreary time period. So if I was to put myself in one of those seasons right now, I would say I'm probably in an autumn period where I've just come out of winter. Mine's probably the years going backwards. So I've just come out of winter, but at the same time, I had a bit of summer energy, high energy mixed in there, because it was a bit of like fight or flight survival mode. And now I'd say I'm in autumn, where it's like, okay, I'm doing a lot of reflecting on that period of like what's just happened, processing, trying to come back into myself and like calm myself down, because my nervous system, what I've realized, was way out of control. Bring it back into myself, and then I hopefully will go into spring, and new beginnings will blossom. So mine's kind of a bit of a jumbled up year in the season that I'm in right now, but I don't know, where would you say you're at on that, on those symbolism scales?
Yeah, so I would say definitely from like last year, June to December, I was for sure in winter. That whole 6 months, it was a winter season for me. And then January to probably about May was spring for me. It was definitely, I was kind of coming out of the funk and I was really starting to kind of have refreshed and renewed energy. And we did take a trip for 2 months. We were traveling for 2 months. And so that always like kind of helps get me out of funk and things. And then I'm currently in full blown summer mode. Like things are happening and it's a little bit chaotic, but it's warm and wonderful. I will say I wanted to add this caveat for people. I think some people resonate the different seasons resonate differently with them, right? Like I know people who love fall and love winter. And I think for them, that's their like spring and summer energy, right? Like they really enjoy like their natural energy is maybe a little more introverted or they like having more of that like slow paced kind of like the autumn style reflection and the coldness and so like the coziness that comes with it, the hygge of it all kind of deal. And I think so for some people, their winter is other people's summer, or their autumn is other people's spring, and or vice versa. You can mix and match. And so I know we're talking about like the symbolism of these things. And so this is like the traditional symbolism, but like whatever resonates with you and what you think about the transition or like the season that you're in. I think it's more so about recognizing what is it that's happening for you personally. Are you in a place of feeling refreshed and renewed, whatever season, like, if that's autumn or whatever for you? Are you feeling like in a place of refresh and renewment and like ready for taking on more? Are you feeling more of that like reflection and needing to kind of go inward and slow things down a bit? Are you in total hibernation mode? Right? Like where it's like, I need to really ease up and just like slow completely down and just be in my present moment where I'm at and have more of a kind of closed environment, which to me is like winterish. Um, or is it that you have like all these opportunities and like all these things you need to be putting into action and integrating, right? It doesn't matter what it's represented for you, if that's winter, spring, fall, whatever. I think being able to, again, be self aware of how are you feeling, how are you thinking, and how is this all going and flowing within what's happening in your life right now. I think that's really important to just note so that like, because it's different for everybody. But I would say, yeah, long answer short to what you asked me. I'm definitely in a summer mode right now. And I know you're end of winter, hopefully coming into spring.
I think I'm end of winter slash spring August situation. It definitely doesn't feel as heavy and cold as it did a couple of months ago, but it's definitely not quite transitioned into that like spring period. I feel like that will happen probably in the actual winter, but we'll see. But yeah, I think what's also interesting is sometimes, for me anyway, I feel like there's a combination as well of things happening, and like maybe that's because I don't always accept the season that I'm in, and I'll try and go into the season that I want to be in. So like naturally I'm quite a high energy person and I like to do a lot of things all at once. I've always said my whole life I'm either 0 or I'm 100, like there's not really like much in between, and I've really tried to work on the in between and like be able to sit in the in between, because I'm not very good at just sitting and like waiting for things to happen. But in the period of life that I've been in right now, I have had to learn how to accept, to sit and wait for things to happen, because there's a lot of things and moving parts in my life right now that I can't just hurry up. Like it doesn't work like that. It's out of my control. So I've had to learn to sit in this middle period, and it's been highly uncomfortable for me. But at the same time, at the beginning, when I wasn't didn't want to sit in that. I was trying to force summer. I was trying to force spring. I was trying to force those things to happen when I really should have just sat in autumn or winter and just dealt with whatever was going on. So sometimes I think it's confusing as well, because we can try and, because we don't want the change, or we don't want to sit with ourselves, and we don't want to take on all of these things that we know we need to take on. We can try and force the other seasons to come in at once, and from experience that doesn't work. But I guess that's sometimes it's just hard to accept the change in seasons. It's hard to accept what's going on for you.
So the question is, for you, what seasons have you seen the most, like, where you've seen the most growth versus the most difficulties? Like, or I guess we'll put it this way, where you've had the most growth, which could be really great mental states, or it can be like your worst mental states. How would you put that for you?
Winter is my worst, because naturally anyway, even if we're talking about real seasons, winter, I don't do winter. Like, that's not for me. Like, I'm such a summer person. I have to be in daylight all the time. I have to be in sunshine. I have to be in heat, which is why I live the life that I do, because being in the winter in the UK is one of the most depressing experiences ever. So even naturally, when we're talking about real seasons, I don't like the winter, and I've always struggled with sad and like got really depressed in winter, which is why I'd always go on holidays in like November or December to like get myself out of the country before I started traveling full time. Um, but then the growth comes, in my opinion, from that spring. I think the growth, the reflective part of the growth comes in autumn, like when you're just sitting still and allowing things to be, and allowing the change to happen, and integrating it, reflecting on it, and understanding it, and fully embodying it. But I think the real growth happens when you are in spring, and you're in that energy of like change and new, because that's when you're integrating things. And I think until you're integrating something, you can't really say you've grown. Like, I think when you're sitting in winter, you're kind of like, it's generally where you feel stuck, and growth is naturally happening, but it's not happening at the rate that you probably want it to happen. Then you can go into like the spring period, and it all just kind of comes really quick. I think the time where you're, for me anyway, experiencing less growth, but trying to just deal with all of the growth that's been happening, is when you're in that summer phase, because that summer phase is where you're like trying to integrate it all, everything that you've learned, and it's all coming at you all at once. But I think for me personally, when I'm in that flow state, and like the changes are happening, and I'm just going with it, and I'm in living in the abundance of it all, the spring phase for me is like my favorite time. And I actually really like change. I really like experiencing new things, which is obviously why I live the way that I do, because I like different experiences. I like things to move forward and happen. I don't like to stay in one place. So when I'm stuck in this winter phase, that for me is like torture, because I am such a natural person to want to go and like do new things, experience and absorb everything that's happening. But winter for me is mentally very, very challenging, because it means I have to sit still.
Sitting still is hard. Take the conversation out of seasons and transitions. Sitting still, I think, is hard for literally everyone.
Yeah.
It like no, a lot of the time we don't want to have to sit and reflect about what's going on with ourselves internally, or what are things that we've been experiencing and how is that affecting us. It can be a really hard process to go through. Um, I mean, I think I'm very similar to you. I think a lot of people are like, winter is winter for a lot of people. Like the actual season of winter really sucks. I guess for me, when I think about it, like spring, I'm a spring and I'm an autumn girl. So I like spring. I like the freshness, the newness, the excitement of things on the horizon, of like and getting ready to implement all the things. Autumn is really nice, like slowing down and reflecting. And I say that because I look at it as like a bell curve. It goes up and then it starts to come down. And summer, sometimes for me, it can be a little bit chaotic. There's just a lot of demands and like things that you have to do between like what you've got going on in work, but now you have all these social activities, especially if let's say it is really nice out summer wise, right? If it's really nice out, people want to get together, they want to do things. It's just much more fast paced. And I am just not a fast paced person. It's just not who I am. And so it can sometimes heighten my anxiety. And right, we got on the call and I was like, yeah, I'm really anxious. I got a lot going on right now. Even though it's beautiful out and I love the summer weather, I love that. It can be very overwhelming for me, and I'm an anxious person in general, and so it just feels like a lot to juggle all at once. And then with winter, I would say like definitely I've done a lot of work to learn to sit with myself. And so it's sitting with myself and being still is not necessarily the issue. Cause like you start to do that in kind of like an autumn phase, right? Like slowing down and reflecting. I think for me, it's more so when things become stagnant, right? Like and right, this is within your control. Even let's say it's true winter here in Chicago. True winter sucks. Like it's bleak, it's gray, it doesn't feel good. But like this last winter ish, so like in January and February, I was still going out for walks every day. And that made a huge difference so that I didn't feel so stagnant. And like I didn't mind that. I didn't mind that like I was out in the cold. I was still moving and I was engaging in behaviors that were allowing me to like do what I needed to not feel stagnant, but like going with the flow in terms of, right, this is cold dead of winter. I need to be a little bit slower with things. And that was perfect. That was totally fine. Now, I did throw myself into work heavily. And so I was like overloading myself with work and not truly leaning into the rest and decompression of winter. And I felt that was I numbed out, right? Like that was my coping for depression and the experiences that I had going on. And then I burnt out. So it
Yeah.
doesn't it really is a matter of being aware of where you're at and what your body needs and like what season you really need to be listening to yourself. And I think it can be really easy to ignore to the intuition. It's taken a long time for me to like listen to my gut and to listen to my body and to really be able to hear it and what it means when it's saying like you need to slow down. Like now is the time not to be throwing yourself into something, or you're already overwhelmed, don't take on more, or you're overwhelmed and you need to pause certain things, you need to step back from stuff. I think it's a skill to really be able to learn to identify what season of life your body is in and what you need. um yeah, I think it's something that's learned over time, and you have to truly genuinely be kind of in tune with yourself.
Yeah, and be nice and compassionate to yourself along the process, because it's not all going to be like sunshine and roses all the time. So like when you do sit in those like stagnant periods, and that's more what I meant when I said I felt stuck. I felt stagnant. I felt like nothing was happening. Like I just felt like stuck in the same place for such a long time, because I also don't mind sitting in the reflection period. Like I've just had a week off where I literally all I did was sit and reflect on things, because it was so necessary. I'd burnt myself out, not even from work, just from like so many life things happening, just so much going on in this winter phase of my life, that my cup was empty. Like literally someone had poured it on the floor and smashed the glass kind of thing. um, and I was like, I need to like rebuild this somehow. So I just had to take a week out, and like I did so much reflection in that week out, and I feel like I've come back and I feel so much more calm and like and able to move into that new season where it doesn't feel as stagnant, or if it does feel stagnant, I've figured out how to move past the stagnancy of it. But yeah, it's hard, and like I guess there's so many different reasons why we don't accept these change into new seasons. I don't know if we want to talk through some of the reasons why we find it so hard to accept change.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you said pour from an empty cup. Uh, because someone just sent me, instead of saying pouring from an empty cup, it's like trying to boil water in a kettle with no water in it. Because
Yeah,
if you've ever tried to, it's like you're boiling an empty kettle that's going to like burn and explode, which I think is a more accurate
yeah,
statement.
yeah. For me, yeah.
Yeah, no, I think for most people, but no, I think right, like some reasons why it's hard to like why it feels so hard to accept the change of seasons in life. I mean, we've kind of touched on it throughout this episode, but like there's a couple of different reasons, right? We have an attachment to the season we're already in. Like we're really enjoying that season and we're not ready for it to end. Or we are just really scared of what's next with that next chapter and like the uncertainty of that comes with moving forward into this new phase. I mean, I don't know. I think it's always I think it's a combination of the two always, right? Like the nostalgia of the past of this is what I've really liked, this is what I've done, and I've really enjoyed this experience versus, yeah, I could definitely experience something new, but that's unknown and I don't know what's going to come with that. And that's kind of terrifying. I think other components include like it is an identity shift. You do have to be able to say, like, yes, this is who I have been. This is what I've been doing. And I'm ready to step into this new version of myself, although I don't know exactly what that version is going to look like. And so things change, right? Your roles and how you define your self-worth in your life shift from season to season. And I feel like those are really core parts of ourselves, and so it can feel really hard to, like, uproot and repot into it, right? Like, if you think about it, like, changing seasons is it's not that we're, cutting at the roots and cutting it off and we're done, it's, no, we're going from a pot that's too small for us now, and we have to repot ourselves into a bigger pot so that we have more room to, one, you know, carry the experiences that we've had, but now move into that, like, new phase of growth. Yeah.
Yeah, you always say that we have to treat ourselves like a plant. So that was like the perfect analogy where literally you have to like rehouse yourself into a bigger pot because you've outgrown the old one.
Yeah, I didn't even really yes, it's so true. Yeah, guys, remember you gotta treat yourself like a houseplant. You're a houseplant with complicated emotions. You need sunlight, you need water, and sometimes you gotta change pots. But yeah, I think there's also, other things where maybe the season of life that you have to move into is it's a little bit forced because of like social or cultural expectations, right? Like there is an expectation for you to show up and do something in a specific way. Not that you have to do that, but if you want to have your values aligned, let's just say with your family, and like if that's what your family is doing, then you need to get on board if that's the route that you're choosing, is that you want to go along with those values and those norms within your family. And there's nothing wrong with that. Now, if you don't want to go with whatever it is that your family is doing, then you can choose otherwise. But again, the transition is still going to be slightly uncomfortable because you have to make those decisions of what direction you're going to go. Um, and sometimes those choices are made for you, right? Like sometimes something happens and you have to physically adjust. You have to emotionally adjust, right? Like maybe you have health issues that pop up that force you into a particular season that like you now have to focus on, which it was unexpected, or you lose someone, a loved one, or there's an experience that's just happening with life, like moving to another country or moving to a new place, and you have to deal with the emotional impact that comes with that. Um, and that all leads into grieving and letting go, right? Grieving is never easy, even if it's a good thing that we're grieving, letting go of it is a good thing. That all of these things combined is what makes, I think, one, consciously looking at the season of your life and being aware of it, and then knowing that you have to be mindful of like, what does your body, mind, and heart need, right? In those moments can make it really hard to transition between those phases. I don't know, anything else you would add?
No, I think it makes sense. There's a lot of different contributors, and I think the more that you can build up a resilience to these things, the more you go through them, obviously, the more you build up the resilience. Annoyingly, you have to go through it to actually build up the resilience and the coping skills. But the more that you can build that resilience, the more that you can make sure that you have that toolbox of things that does support you when you're going through those hard, more difficult moments that you struggle with. And the more that you can like build up those habits, behaviors, routines, and that stability in your life to see you through, the easier the change of seasons is going to be, the easier going that transition is going to be, the easier you're going to be able to accept change. Because I think the thing that keeps us stuck in that winter phase is not accepting what's happening. And that's don't get me wrong, easier said than done. I am so guilty of being stuck in some of those seasons sometimes, but um, the more that you can try and go into that more reflective mode and um, allow yourself to just be, the easier the transition is going to be. I think so much of our anxieties and our mood changes is because we resist. We don't allow things to be the way that they should naturally be, and then that's when we really do get stuck and we really do get stagnant, and that's when winter lasts for years rather than months or weeks, kind of thing.
Or we worry too much about what's to come next, right? The whole
Exactly.
depression is in the past, anxiety is in the future, right?
Yeah.
Like it's just, but you're right. Like we aren't accepting the way that things need to be in the present moment, like what we need. And so we're either holding on to the past or we're stuck there because for whatever reason, or we're too worried about what's to come. And then
Yeah.
either way, it's ungrounding us and it's removing us from our pot completely.
Yeah. Exactly. Our pot is toppling over to the side. So yeah, there's a lot that we can do, but ultimately, at the end of the day, change and transitioning into new seasons of life is completely normal. And actually, we did an episode on happiness recently, and like what the key things are to actually fulfill somebody and make them happy. And one of them is experiencing change and letting change happen in their lives, because ultimately change generally means growth, and growth can only really mean positive things. It's not like you're moving forward, not backwards. So I think if we can start to embrace change and look at it in more of a positive light, and that it's going to take us to where we actually want to be, people would accept it more, and we would all be living way more happy, content lives all throughout all of these seasons.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I think, okay, so just like one last thing before, we wrap up. What what are you looking for like for your next season? What are you most excited for next in your next transition and season of life?
My next season, I think, involves a little bit more stability, which, if I reflect on my entire life, in all honesty, I've never really had that. Because not that I didn't have stability growing up when I was a child, I did. But if I look at the past 10 years of my life, I'm 32, right? So if I started traveling when I was 21, I have not been in one place for more than like a couple of years, or in one job for more than a couple of years, or in one relationship for more than a few years, like for my whole life. Like my whole life has just involved me moving on to the next thing, the moving on to the next thing, next thing. Even when I was working in fashion, I'd have a job for 2 3 years and I'd be like, nah, bored now, let's move on to the next one. Or like, I would constantly be changing things up for the past 10 years. I feel like the next phase of my life involves a little bit more stability. I don't think that's going to be like permanent stability, but it's going to be more stability than I've definitely had over the past 3 years. And I really feel like I'm needing that and craving that. And don't get me wrong, I think I've said this before, I'm never going to be somebody that settles down and has the white picket fence life. Like that is not for me. It's not going to happen. But I am looking forward to moving into that next season of life, and whatever stability means. Stability doesn't need to mean that I'm in one place experiencing one thing, but I think it just means that I would like some more constants in my life that stay there for longer periods of time. And I'm really excited to see what that looks like, because like I say, I don't really know exactly what that looks like yet. I'm still trying to figure it out. But yeah, that's where I think I'm going to go to next. How about you?
Well, I love that. I think that's amazing because I've been on your ass about the stability since like we've been friends. So I love that. I love that for you. For me, I think I'm really excited for it's been a little bit of a like chaos for the summer and I've got a lot going on between like these two businesses and we were traveling a lot for 2 months. Um I'm excited for a combination of kind of two things. Slowing down and reflecting on like everything that has happened over the last 4 months with like my travels, with this new challenge I'm doing in my business, with launching Tina, all of that. I want to like slow down, reflect, and kind of reground a little bit. And then I want to use that with a more intentional growth, like that renewal of like spring, but a slowed down version of it, right? Like, so I have a little bit of that autumn that's kind of trickling into a spring winter-ish. It's a
Makes
combination
sense.
of things, but yeah, I would say if I had to pick 2 terms is like the slowing down reflection with a little more intentional, like, refining from what I get out of that reflection. That's what
No.
I don't wanna do anything necessarily new, I wanna just refine, if that makes sense.
Well,
So,
yeah, it's refocusing your attention, right? Like you've already set yourself up into like different things that you want to be doing. Like I think both of us
yeah,
have, but it's about fine tuning that now. And I feel the same.
yeah,
Like this new piece of stability also comes with a newfound focus and attention on the end goal, kind of thing, rather than like dipping. Like I feel like when you start a business, particularly, you constantly have to experiment to try and figure out what works, what doesn't work. Same in
yeah,
relationships, same in every seasons of life, same in like where you want to live, everything. You have to experiment, try and test something before you decide this is what I'm going to do. And I feel like I've been in this massive experiment phase for quite a long time. And part of this like stability piece is fine tuning and
mhm,
getting it, narrowing it down. And it's never going to be 100% all the time. That's not going to happen. That's not how life works. As we say, things can always be changing, but it's about kind of like honing and focusing on the things that are the most important rather than trying to do all of the things and dip your hands
yeah,
in all the pies to try and figure it out. It's more now like looking back, reflecting on like, what did I want, what did I like, what did I learn, what do I now take forward? Because then I think that that's also another factor of like being really happy and comfortable in your life, is knowing that you're only doing things that you are 100% happy that you're doing.
yes. Well freaking said. Couldn't have said it better myself. So I guess, like, what I'll say just for our audience, since we're wrapping up the episode, what are you guys excited about? What is the like, what season are you currently in? And what are you excited about happening next for you? Sound like a good
Good
question? Let us know in the
question.
comments. Yeah, we'd love to hear it. On that note, we just want to say, thanks for listening to our episode today. If this resonated with you, be sure to give us a like. We'd love to hear your feedback in the comments about what other topics you'd like to hear more about. But we'd also love to hear about, the season that you're in and where you want to go. And don't forget to subscribe, follow us on socials, and join the community at timeisnotahealer.com. All of the details can be found in the episode description below. And remember, you hold the power to heal. Until next time, you've got this.